Hello and welcome. My name is Tom. This is the Enthusiasm Project Season 4, Episode 19. We're coming up on the end of the season. As you know, for no particular reason, I do 21 episode seasons. So you've got 2 more, and then I'm going to take a break for a few weeks, and then I'll be back for Season 5. But today we have a Q&A episode. I've been trying to do about 2 Q&A episodes per season because they're really, really fun. But I also don't want the well to run dry. If I did it too often, then, maybe I wouldn't get as many questions or what have you. And, it's nice to get, I've gotten different questions every time I've done these, which is really cool. And I've got a great batch today. I am doing a video version of this podcast, which is, it's so funny because, I'm putting more and more production effort into the video version of things, even though it is the least consumed version, but it's sort of a fun little side thing to just play around with. So for the video version, I've got a multi-camera setup. We've got my main camera, which is the Sony a7S III, and that is actually on the Shark Slider Nano, which is a cool little motorized slider that I'm experimenting with. So it's kind of going back and forth, doing some parallax, getting some visual interest. You got the Canon EOS R happening. And of course, we got the GoPro as the God camera that can see everything. But the reason I wanted to point out the video version is because since we are doing questions and answers, I did try to sort of take it up a little bit of a notch. And so I'll be able to pop all the questions on screen, which I don't know. I think that's helpful if you want to actually know the person's screen name and I'm butchering it and mispronouncing it. You can actually see it there and find them or go follow them, which sounds sort of ominous, but it's not. So we'll just kind of jump in there. I've got questions from Twitter, from the YouTube community section, from Instagram, and I've also got several audio submissions. So that's super cool. That's a lot. And we'll just sort of dive in. I think pretty much everything that I had planned to talk about is something that will pop up during the questions. So that's super convenient. It's like we all work together for that. And yeah, if you're wondering, I'm using the Shure SM7B today. And the reason for that would be because I am going to be doing a lot of mouse clicking and stuff. And I just figured it would reject it the best. My most recent video, if you're listening to this when it comes out, the most recent video will have been about the Rode NT1, which is where it's hanging on my microphone wall somewhere over here. And that's a wonderful mic, but as a condenser, it might be more prone to picking up keyboard and mouse sounds, and I didn't want to drive you crazy with too much clicking. So that's where we're at. Let's just jump straight into that. We're going to do the Twitter questions first because I've only got a few of those. So our first Twitter question comes from Matt W. Ruff at Matt W. Ruff. And it says, the question I get asked the most, parentheses, I know you've answered before, is how do you send audio from the Rodecaster Pro to the ATEM or your camera? The reason I'm stuttering is because I said the Rode Podcaster, but I'm guessing, and knowing Matt, I'm guessing you meant the Rodecaster, but that's Rode's thing of they have the Podcaster, the Broadcaster, the Procaster, the Rodecaster, and they're all different things. So the Rodecaster Pro, that's what I'm going to assume it means. But getting that audio can be a little tricky because I made a video about this, and you can totally just run an output from the Rodecaster into a camera, into an ATEM, and it works really well. For the most part, I do recommend using the monitor outputs in the back of the Rodecaster. It has 1/4-inch left and right monitor outputs, so the big plugs, like an instrument cable. You plug those in, and if you get a Y cable, it has 2 of those on one end and then a stereo 3.5 millimeter on the other. Then you can plug that right into your camera or into the ATEM, and you should be all set. The reason I say should is because depending on your camera, and other variables and things or interference or the kind of cable that you're using, you could be prone to some sort of interference, and sometimes people have high-pitched whines and stuff. There was a thing on my old MacBook, which is sitting over here on my shelf. For some reason, when I run audio from that, it's fine. But if I have the HDMI output connected to that computer, then it gets a high-pitched whine. So like everything is clear. As soon as I plug in the HDMI cable, then the audio output gets this weird whine. And stuff like that can happen sometimes when you're running like one cable into another. So that is a way to do it. You can run that directly into the ATEM, and then hopefully you'll be all set. But the way I do it, which is literally what I'm doing right now for the video version of this podcast, is I have the ATEM connected to my computer via USB on its own, and then I've got the Rodecaster connected to my computer via USB as well. And that's pretty much that. Sorry, I was checking something on the Rodecaster as I was saying that. And that's pretty much that. And the reason I do that is because by having both connected to USB separately, it just gives me the best signal. Sometimes there are syncing issues. I do have a 5-frame delay on Ecamm, which seems to work pretty well. And the reason you have sync issues, because that's another thing, you're like, oh my gosh, I have my audio plugged in and my video plugged in, but they're not matched up. And it doesn't really matter like the connection speed. It's just video signals are bigger and they're going to take longer to get there. Audio is smaller. Like it's like the analogy I always use is if two people are running and they have the exact same speed, stamina, everything, but one person is carrying a bag of marshmallows and the other is carrying a bag of bricks, which one's going to get there first? Like marshmallow person's probably going to get there first because they just have less to carry. That would be audio. Video is going to be, a little bit heavier. So that's why you need to just delay the audio a little bit so they can catch back up to each other. Anyway, I hope that answers that question. Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate that. Hey, that rhymed. Next question from Twitter comes from @TV Production Guy, Michael James Hickey. I have an empty room. I do not have an empty room, Michael. Plenty of gear and editing equipment to get going. What are the first 5 steps to starting off a beginner YouTube channel, or the first 5 things you would have done differently when you first started? That's an awesome question, especially because you already have the resources. So it's like, I've got everything. What do I do? The biggest thing, so number 1 would be just get started. And I know that sounds very basic and whatever, but literally, I've talked about this so many times. You can be stuck in, I got to get everything perfect before I can get started. Just throw that out the window and just get started. That's the most important thing you can do, even if it means not using everything you have. You may or may not have heard when I told the story of when I started my YouTube channel, I had equipment. I had, a DSLR and some lenses and audio gear, but I was getting so hung up on trying to get everything perfect that I just went out and bought the little Sony point and shoot RX100 and started with that. Had no mic input, had no ability to change lenses. It was just like, use this, eliminate everything else, build up the workflow, and then come back to that. So that worked really well for me. But anyway, you might not have. So just getting started is number 1. Number 2, focus on your audio. So you mentioned that you have gear and stuff like that. Just make sure people can hear whatever you're saying. I even said that before a camera or anything, because audio is really more important in a lot of ways than the visuals. So focus on having good audio. Focus on having a purpose. If you're just starting out on YouTube, these are just sort of random things, so not in any particular order. But if you're just starting out on YouTube, you're not going to know exactly who your audience is right away. You're not going to know what your channel is right away. It's all going to evolve over time, even with the best laid plans. So have some kind of purpose, though, with everything you make. You can totally experiment when you're just starting out. There's nothing wrong with just, I'm going to try this kind of video. I'm going to try that kind of video. Now I'm going to do this. Now I'm going to do that. Did this work? People seem to actually watch this video. People didn't seem to watch that video. And, hopefully you can find an overlap between something that people like to watch and something you like to make. And if there's a nice overlap there, that's where you should focus on. But having a purpose is good, especially, when you're new. You could just want to create things for the sake of creating. And that's a great thing. Like if you just make a video, put it out there, nobody watches it, it's still an accomplishment. But if you do want to grow and you do want to build an audience, remember that nobody has any idea who you are, what you do, what you know, anything. And you can help them learn about that stuff over time. But the thing that you really want to do is make sure they're going to get something from your video. That's why a lot of people start out with tutorials and reviews and stuff like that, where people can come to your channel and get some kind of real concrete takeaway from it. So providing something of value, having a purpose. Talked about this in a previous episode where a lot of people will say like story is king. And yes, but sometimes on YouTube, your story might be a tutorial or something. So like this Adobe Photoshop tutorial might not have a huge story in a traditional sense, but it definitely has a purpose. And so just make sure you have a purpose in whatever you make, and then experiment and kind of find what you want to make there. Continue making stuff. That would be my fourth thing to recommend. It's very easy, especially when it feels like nobody is watching, to make a couple videos and then go, yeah, no one's watching. If I take some time off, who cares? Have your upload schedule. It doesn't matter if people care or not. It's mostly for you at that point. Make it sustainable. Weekly, I think, is ideal. It seems like that's pretty manageable. If you have a job that you need to take care of, family you need to take care of, that's cool. Weekly is good, and just keep doing it. Even if no one's watching, it's going to get you in the habit of making that a part of your life. It's like going to the gym, right? If you want to exercise and get in better shape, you need to go to the gym regularly, not just like the day after you eat a big meal. Okay, I'm going to the gym. Now I'm not going to go for a few more weeks. Like, you need to go consistently to see results. Same thing on YouTube. And when you're starting, the results could literally just be getting better at making videos, or figuring out like, oh, dang, I have not been putting descriptions in my videos. I've just been uploading them, like little things like that. Oh, the thumbnail is important. If I use the YouTube generated ones, no one watches. But if I spend some time on my own thumbnail, then lots of people watch. So that's that. And then my last thing for you specifically, Michael, since you've got the empty room, would be to really play around with that space. Don't be afraid to change things up. Like, I know you say it's empty, but you might set it up to start filming something a certain way. Don't feel like that's how it has to be every time. You can flip it, move it, change it, find out what works. What I ended up doing after I had been doing, because the room I'm in right now had existed prior to me doing YouTube. It was just my music room, like kind of like my office and stuff, but it was not arranged like this at all. But after I started doing YouTube for a while, I started realizing what I wanted, what I didn't want. I knew I wanted like my big blue wall in the background. I knew, that kind of stuff. So I literally just took my camera and kind of set it in different spots to see what looked good in the background. And then I rearranged the room around that. So it's not the most practical setup in how you would set up a room in real life, but it makes total sense for the kind of work that I do in here. And you might want to do something like that instead of feeling like, you need to get everything exactly where it's going to be forever. Play around a little bit, and then, use your camera. There might be, your room might have a corner or an angle or an architectural feature or some furniture that fits in a certain spot that just works really well in the background. And that could be really, really cool. So those are my 5 off the top of my head tips to someone just starting out. But if you are going to get started, number 1 is just get started, and good luck. It's if it turns out to be your thing, it's one of the best things you could possibly do. All right, coming up next, we've got Albert. Boom. K. Albert Little at Cordial Catholic says, I've edited with Audacity since, honestly, it was an alpha version, and I used to record angsty emo music in my college dorm room. Nice. Now that I'm podcasting professionally, I use it because I know it, and it's easy, but am I missing out on something by not switching to professional software? You're assuming that Audacity doesn't count as professional software, and I know it's not Logic or Audition or whatever, but just because you have the audacity to keep using Audacity, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that. The thing that I have been sticking with for a while now is the idea that if it works, it works. And that goes for everything: gear, workflow, whatever. If something's working for you and it's doing a good job, it's fine. If you want to branch out because you're curious about another software application or something, then in that would be a good time to go, okay, now I want to learn Logic, so I'm going to invest in that and try that out. But if your show's sounding great and your audience is happy, and if you're working with anyone and they're cool with it, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And Audacity is really, really good software. And if you know it, you know it. And if it works, it works. So I don't think you're missing out on anything unless there's something you really, really need. If you find yourself hitting the ceiling pretty often, like, boy, I sure wish I could do this thing that like Audacity can't do. And that happens every time you're making something, and there's another application that can do that thing, then that's probably like a good time to consider, hey, maybe I should hop over into that thing over there. Thank you so much, Albert, for that question. And last Twitter question of the day is from Josh Scott 928. How is the Sony a7S III for you compared to the EOS R, and how does it fit in your workflow? Thank you, Josh. I saved yours for the last Twitter question because it's sort of like an update on the camera saga. The a7S III is great. I really like it. If I don't sound like I'm over the moon about it, it's not that I'm not. It's just that, it's just that I think after 9 months or so of hearing it, praised as like the Jesus camera that's gonna just, oh my gosh, it's the best camera in the world, and then getting it, it's really good. But like my EOS Rs are also really good. Like every camera is good, so it wasn't like, knock my socks off. Oh my God, everything is different now. How crazy. It's better. It's a better video camera. It's objectively better for video in every way. And I really like it. And the more that I use it, the more that I like it. You might remember there's an episode of King of the Hill where Hank has his old pickup truck that he's had forever and it's starting to die. And he goes to the dealership and he doesn't want to get a new one. And he gets in this fight with Bobby about it. And his son Bobby runs away in like a rainstorm. And Hank needs to just take one of the new trucks on a test drive. And he's like not into it at all. But as he goes on the test drive, things happen. Like, it has anti-lock brakes. It gets mud splattered on the headlights. And they have little wipers that wipe the mud off. It has a seat warm. Like everything, as he's like searching for his son and eventually finding his son, he's sort of like ends up using all the different features of this truck and really liking it. And that's kind of how I feel about the Sony, except that I didn't not like it at first. I liked it originally, but the more I use it, it's sort of like, oh, this is really nice. This is really cool. Like, it's really neat. So I like that. It fits into my workflow really well. It compares to the R. The reason I took your question off the screen, Josh, if you're watching, is because I just figured since I'm using the Sony, you could just see the image. A couple things. So here's the Sony, and then here is the EOS R. If you're watching this, you can see the two. I can just sort of cut side by side here. Actually, if you're watching this, I'm using the ATEM Extreme. I might be able to do some cuckoo banana picture-in-picture situation. I'm still learning the ATEM Extreme. So if you know that I've been using it and you're like, hey, Tom, how come you haven't done a review on that thing yet? Well, that's because I'm still learning it. I'm trying to do a picture-in-picture, but I'm struggling over here. And I have done all the stuff that I did not need to do. There we go. Okay. If you're watching the video version of this, it's very weird because it's split screen, but also I am the background. It's okay. But on the left side of the screen is the Canon R, and on the right side of the screen is the Sony. You can definitely see, a little bit difference in color, but they match really well. My Rode NT1 video is the first official video that I've made with the Sony as the main camera. And I cut back and forth between both of my Rs, and it's just fine. I'm sure if you're a professional colorist, you could see difference in skin tone and difference in certain colors, but the Sony fits in great. They play together really well. I have a preset that I made in Final Cut ages ago that it's the same one I use with the Rs. I put that on the Sony footage. It works really well. And then I bump the Sony. I go into the color wheels of Final Cut Pro and move the Sony 2 notches to the red, and then I move the Rs 4 notches to the green, and they seem to line up pretty well after that, which I'm really happy about because I fully understand what people mean when they say don't mix camera brands and stick with one brand. And after using, two of the same camera for about a year almost, is really nice to have two of the exact same thing. The settings match perfectly. The buttons are all in the same place. Like, it really is nice. The batteries, the lenses, all the same. And when you throw in, especially not just a different model, but a different brand, you're changing a lot of that stuff. I was prepared for that, so that hasn't been a roadblock. And I really like, branching out from Canon, like Sony has certain things that are different and better, and Canon has certain things that are different and better. And instead of having to pick a side and choose and be like, no, I'm switching, I'm Sony now, Canon, blah, blah, like they're all great. And, all the other ones too, like the other companies I'm not using, Sony just made sense because I could adapt some of my existing lenses. So that's why that was there. But it seems like the Sony Canon rivalry is also the like fiercest, at least between their fans. They're like big fans. And so I kind of like that I'm using both at the same time. And I like that for the most part, unless someone is aware of it because they've like listened to this podcast or something, they're not even going to notice. I think that sort of just proves a point, and I was scared that I'm going to reinvent the wheels. So as you may or may not know, I like to ride my bike a lot. And I've been doing that for about 9 years, like road cycling and stuff. And when I got my first road bike, the thing I said to myself was, I'm not going to wear the bike clothes. I was way too self-conscious to wear like tight spandex bike clothes. No, thank you. And eventually, after about 2 months, I was wearing full bike clothes because I just sort of discovered the purpose for everything along the way. Like, oh, a cotton t-shirt kind of sucks to ride a bike in because it flaps in the wind and it gets sweaty and the sweat doesn't go away. Whereas like the bike jersey, it doesn't flap in the wind. It wicks sweat away from you. It has pockets to store stuff. It's longer in the back so it doesn't like pull up. It makes sense. Bike shorts let you have more stamina and they don't get caught in things. Bike shoes let you, use power, not just when you're pushing down on a pedal, but when you're pulling up. So it took me about 2 months, piece by piece, to just end up in a full bike outfit. But I understood the purpose of it. The reason I brought that up is because there is very common knowledge with a very good reason, or common advice with very good reason to say, don't mix camera brands, just because, the colors are different. Everything's different. And I fully understand where that's going. And I have more knowledge about cameras than I did when I was, than bikes when I started riding bikes. But I felt comfortable in knowing that for my specific workflow and how I do things, it could be okay to add in a new camera. And and it's been really great. I love the autofocus on the Sony. It's amazing. It's so smooth and natural. And I really love, which I didn't expect, the lens that I got, the 24 millimeter G Master lens, is so good. I've always thought Canon lenses are the best, but this lens is really nice. Image quality is good. I mean, I think my Sigma 24 that I use with my Canon, they're probably on par with image quality, and I do plan on doing a video about that. But otherwise, like autofocus, so much better. You can put this lens just by like twisting a thing, you can put it into manual aperture. With a click of a button, you can then de-click the aperture. So it's like you have so many options. And most importantly, the lens is totally silent. It makes no sound with autofocus. So I have actually a pod mic sitting next to the EOS R that's using my Sigma 24 because I didn't realize how quiet this Sony lens was until last week when I had the other A7S III, because I had that screen problem, which I just sort of gave up on. And I just sort of gave up, and it's fine. Because ultimately the screen thing doesn't really affect my work. It's annoying when I'm looking at the camera and I'm looking at the computer and they're not matching up. But ultimately, like for a stream like this, I'm going to adjust the image anyway before I, start recording or start streaming. When I put the footage into Final Cut, I'm going to tweak the colors a little bit in the image anyway. So as long as the screen is pretty close, it's fine. And the fact that like the other Sony was exactly the same just makes me think it's just a Sony thing. So I'd prefer if that weren't the case, or if I could at least adjust the color temperature on the screen, but it's definitely not a deal breaker. And I think the more I use the camera and do other things that I like with it, the more I'll forget about the screen problem. It's just, when it's brand new is a frustrating thing. But when I had that other camera and I was trying to compare shots and do everything, I put the Sigma lens on it and I was switching the lenses back and forth to see if that was affecting anything. But I was like, what is that sound? And that's when I heard, oh my gosh, that's Sigma. It just makes normal lens sound when it's focusing. But oh my gosh, I had no idea. It was like the M1 Mac Mini, where once it's a dead silent computer, as soon as I was like on my MacBook and the fans are turning on, it was like, oh my gosh, these are even louder than I thought. So I have a pod mic next to the lens on the R that has the 24 millimeter. So here is the focusing sound of the Sigma. I don't know if you can hear this. That's just it. I'm just holding my hand around the thing so you can hear it. I guess I probably don't need to mute my mic, but I'm just holding my hand near it so the camera's focusing. If you're watching, you can sort of see like it's focusing on my hand, it's focusing on me, focusing on my hand, and that's just the normal autofocus sound that camera makes. But here, I will take this microphone and I will swing it around, try not to hit anything, and I'm going to put it right next to the Sony lens. So let's see. So here we are with the Sony thing, and here is, well, let me make sure the lens is focusing. There we go. It's focusing on me, or my hand, focusing on me. It's dead silent. Like, I mean, I almost even debated on like, do I need to put the microphone near that at all? But ultimately I decided that it was I'll do the test accurately just to show you how quiet it is, but it is dead silent, doesn't make any sound, which is great because I haven't done this yet. But when it comes to running the Sony with a mic directly on top of it, I've been running it with like boom mics and stuff. That means I'm not going to have to deal with that clicky lens noise, which I've just gotten used to, and you hear it in videos all the time, and I just sort of, it is what it is. Not a problem on here. So that's one of those things where it's like, dang, okay, I like this. But yeah, both cameras are doing great. It's fun to have both. It's fun to see them play together. I don't think they're like throwing curse words at each other at nighttime when I'm not in here. They seem to be getting along just great. Yeah, I mean, they're awesome cameras. The Sony, because it is geared more towards video, does have some things that make the video workflow a little easier and a little better. I mean, full-size HDMI out, stuff like that is really nice. But anyway, we can get into camera talk later. I didn't mean to go for 20 minutes on Josh's question. So thank you, Josh. Now, let's jump into some of the audio questions. The first one is from Bailey Stone. Thank you so much, Bailey. I appreciate all your comments and support and stuff. Bailey's got an awesome YouTube channel and stuff too, and podcast too. Am I right? So here is Bailey's question.
Hey, Tom. Bailey from Australia here. I was just wondering, like, how you got into your digital media career and how you found out that you really enjoyed teaching it and teaching it to others as well. Thanks.
I pushed the wrong button. Thank you for your question, Bailey. How I got into digital media was that I really liked analog media because there was no digital media, but using cameras and stuff as a kid was amazing. And then after years of editing VCR to VCR, where you're like, and not just VCR to VCR, like you have your 8mm camera and then you want to put the footage into a VCR and you have to like mix and match, but then you're editing that footage back to like another VCR or back to your camera so then you can add it back and add in music. And each time you do that, you're losing quality. So it gets mushier and mushier and worse. Very, 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 very frustrating stuff to deal with. And then suddenly it was like you could put your video onto a computer and just like move clips around. It was unbelievable. So that just like, I became completely addicted. My high school video production class got like the very first iMac with iMovie 1 and you could edit on there. That was it. Like there's no going back, and just, it's something I just never gave up. So even when I was going to college for like English, even when I was maybe more focused on graphic design and stuff, I just sort of always doing video stuff and media stuff, either, you know, in some kind of paid capacity, a freelance capacity, or just on my own for fun. And that just never went away. And then eventually I started as an English teacher, and the second year I was teaching English, a media teacher left the school kind of suddenly, and the principal just knew my background. I was also teaching yearbook, so I like, you know, he knew that I had that experience, and that's when I'm like, hey, you want to jump in and take this position? Yes. So I sort of fell backwards into the teaching part of it, but the reason I was able to do that was because I had always had, you know, at least a foot in that world, if not more. And just over when you have those skills, they're valuable. So it's, you know, it doesn't take long. Like at the school, I was teaching yearbook, but that also means I'm at games taking photos. I'm putting together videos for things. I'm like helping out with media needs around campus. So it just, those skills pop up very regularly, and people know that you have them, and they're super valuable. And then when they need those skills, they know who to ask. And that's kind of how that happened. So it was essentially just by following something that I really loved and never letting it go, it just sort of came back around, and now this is my job. So I don't know, it's crazy, but I love that. So thank you, Bailey, so much for your question. I really appreciate that. Our next question is from Mike Ferracci, and I hope I said that right. So here we go. Oh, wait, am I on the right thing? Yeah, here we go.
Hey, Tom, this is Mike, and I'm about to up my webinar hosting game for work. I'm currently using a Fujifilm X-T2 with a Shure MV51 microphone. I'm running all that via my MacBook Pro into the app. And yes, that makes me feel stupid every single time I say the name of that app, but it does let me upload my slides and allows it to look nice and pretty when I run it into the Zoom webinar software. But it's a lot. And I'm not talking about gear and software. It's just a lot on the screen, especially when you start popping out Q&A boxes and launching polls to your audience. I know that you have a lot of experience with teaching and hosting classes and live streams and all sorts of stuff like that. Do you have any tips as it pertains to staying engaged with your camera while running all of these different windows open on your computer and or boards that you're controlling on your desk? I find myself getting lost in the inner workings of the webinar, and it's hard to stay focused down the lens to make sure that my audience is engaged. Please help. Any advice would be much appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike, so much. I can definitely help you there. I was getting worried when I first heard your question because I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to be a very technical question of, you know, all these different things running into each other and being connected, and what do you do? And fortunately, your your question was a little simpler than that. But it really is something that's difficult, because Heather and I were just talking about this yesterday. There are times, especially on our stream, the couples table, like right now I'm running this all by myself. This is primarily an audio thing. The vast majority of people who listen to this podcast listen to the audio only version. So even though there is a video component, which is now 3 cameras strong, and you know, I am paying attention to that, but it is sort of just me, and I'm not streaming this. So that actually makes things easier. As soon as a stream comes into play, because then it's like you mentioned, you've got chat happening, you've got that, and then like on the couples table, Heather and I are here, so I'm trying to talk to her, pay attention to her, pay attention to the chat, keep in mind just all, you know, mic technique and where to look and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff, and then focus on the audio. And it's really, really tough. And sometimes in the chat for the couples table, people will say like, Tom, your mic is too loud, or Heather's too low. And I like have a mini panic attack inside when that happens, because I feel embarrassed and I feel stressed, and I'm trying to like, I gotta make it better. And I'm just like, you know, in my headphones, it sounds one way, but by the time it gets to YouTube and through Ecamm, it sounds a different way. And oh, it can be so difficult. But the least sad, so I'm telling you that just to let you know that you're not alone and that people all feel this way. But the answer to your question, staying engaged with your camera, is I'm going to give you the least satisfying answer ever, which is it just takes practice. And it's really, really true. I don't know how much practice. I think that's to be different for everybody, but I know like right now, the camera I'm looking in, the Sony a7S III on a slider, is moving back and forth very slowly, but it's moving back and forth. So it's not even in the same spot. Like right now, it's, it's kind of over to my right. But if I were to switch to a different camera angle and focus on something else for a while and then think for a bit and then come back to the Sony, it's literally going to be in a different position than it was. So the easiest way to do it is to think of your camera as a person, because it is your audience, it's your viewer, whatever. So think of it as a person and engage with it the same way you would engage with a person face to face. If you're having a conversation with someone, it doesn't mean you're just giving them direct eye contact the whole time in like this really creepy way, but you're mainly focusing on them. You might look away, you might look towards something else or somebody else. If you have like a co-host or a webinar, or you're looking at a presentation, and then you're going to come back to the person and talk to them. So just, if you think of it that way, instead of just this black circle, glass circle that's the lens, but it is a person and you start talking to it like a person, it really does help. And over time, you just sort of become trained to look at the camera. And the reason I know that is because it's gotten so bad. Not bad. It's a good kind of bad, but it's become such a reflex for me now that I can't not look at the camera, which is half the reason I decided to play around with video podcasts, is because even when I was sitting in here doing audio only and the camera's turned off, I would still be staring at the camera just because that's what I'm used to. I was like, well, hey, if I'm staring at the camera, it might as well be on. And that's happened. Like there have been times where, there have been a couple times, especially over the past year, where I'm using, my nice camera to do a call with someone like on Zoom or something or FaceTime or whatever. And then for whatever reason, I can't use that anymore. Sometimes, especially, it seems like if they have a bad connection, it works better if I just use the built-in webcam like on my old MacBook or something. And so I'd switch to that, which of course didn't look good. But even though I knew now, okay, it's the MacBook camera that's on, there's a green light next to it, I still half the time would be looking the other direction at the camera. So it's just, there's nothing wrong with looking away and needing to look at your presentation, needing to look at the chat. I think a lot of viewers are really used to seeing people kind of glance off to the side at this point to look at information. You could always do something like put a teleprompter in front of your camera with a little monitor, so that way the content you need to look at is right in front of the camera. But looking away is no big deal. When you talk to someone in real life, they look away all the time and then, glance back at you. As long as your main focus is the camera and that person. And the more that you do that, and the more that you train yourself, you're not going to have to think about it anymore. It's just going to be, it's like your natural home point, where when you're not thinking or actively doing anything else, that's just where you're going to return to, is the camera right there. And it takes a bit of practice, but it's not too bad. So hopefully that kind of helps, at least reassure you a little bit. Thanks so much for your question, Mike. Appreciate it. I said this in my email back to you, but your audio quality sounded great. Actually, everybody's does. And that's not to exclude our next voice question, which is from Florian Enkrot.
Hey Tom, this is Florian from Germany. I like your podcast playbook very much. It's a big thing. And I would like to know, when did the passion for podcasting start in your life? Have a nice day. Goodbye.
Thank you, Florian. And thank you for enrolling in the Podcaster Playbook. If anybody listening would like to create your own podcast and you need a DIY step-by-step guide, you can go to podcasterplaybook.com and enroll today. That's my plug, which the course has been doing great. And now that I'm getting feedback and stuff, it's been awesome. So I'm really excited about that. But anyway, that's beside the point, because Florian's real question was, where did the passion for podcasting, the podcastion, where did that originate? It sort of like starts with, like all things, I really liked audio video stuff. And for me, podcasting, I got into it before video podcasting was at all a popular thing. It just wasn't even practical at all. So I think of it mostly as audio. And the thing that really pushed me into it was Adam Carolla, of all people, because he used to have a radio show for a lot of years, and I used to listen to it every morning at work. When I was a graphic artist at Trader Joe's, we would listen from 6 to 10 a.m. We would listen to the Adam Carolla show. And then one day, suddenly, it was like, oh, our radio station's closing down, so this is our last show. It was like a Friday. And this was in 2009. And I think it was 2009. And he was super smart because someone on his team or something was like, just turn your radio show into a podcast, start a podcast on Monday. Like people are already used to listening. And so that's what he said. He was like, go to my website and listen to the podcast on Monday. He didn't even like know what a podcast was. And I was like, okay, what is that? And then on Monday, it was like this very low audio quality, low budget version, but it was still like him and people on radio show, and listened to a while. It was fun to hear him like put together a studio, improve the audio quality, bring back in like music and sound effects. And eventually it just became what was the actual radio show, but done on his own instead of through a radio station. I thought that was super cool. I don't listen to his podcast anymore. But that's kind of where it went through, and that seeing it go from literally an idea of like, we'll figure this out in 2 days to full on production. Obviously there's his access to budget and resources that I didn't have. That was really interesting to me because that was like, wow, this is just open. I can have a website. I have GarageBand. I have a microphone. Like I could do something like a podcast. And then it just came down to the struggle of what the heck would I talk about? And so I spent a lot of years like wanting to do a podcast, sort of coming up with ideas, but never knowing what to talk about. It was also much tougher then to get your podcast out, get your RSS feed submitted to stuff. And it just wasn't as nice as it is now with like all these services like Buzzsprout where you can upload something and it's submitted automatically and it's easier to record and get better quality. So that, that definitely helped. 2014, I started producing podcasts for other people, for schools and school districts and stuff, and then set up podcast studios at 2 different schools, 2 different districts. And then eventually, finally in 2019 was where I was like, I should do my own podcast. And ultimately, like I had my YouTube channel, which was the thing where I really like cared about the numbers. And so I was like, I'm gonna do a podcast and like literally not pay attention to or care about the numbers at all, but just do it as a way for me to have a deep dive into stuff that I'm interested in. And if people want to join along, then they totally can. And that's kind of it. It's just it's a neat offshoot of the stuff that I've always been interested in. And again, just like with YouTube, the only regret is not starting sooner. If I had just like, instead of only producing other people's podcasts in 2014, if I had produced my own, I mean, I'm happy with where things are. So I guess it's that thing where like, I guess I could have changed something, but then I wouldn't have what I have now. But yeah, if I could have had another 5 years of podcasting, like with me hosting experience, that would have been cool. So that's why I'm always like, just start. If you have the itch, just start, get started, do that. But I hope that sort of answers the question. Thank you guys for all those audio submissions. Now we're going to jump back into, let's go to YouTube and get some questions from the community tab on YouTube. The first one is from Sajid Haq. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, and I'm sorry, but that's why it's up on screen. A very simple question. Is the Rode Pod mic suitable for recording vocals for a song? And I wanted to answer that because this is a question I actually get a lot. Since the Pod mic has pod in the name, a lot of times people think that, well, that means it's only for podcasting, spoken word. But the Pod mic it's just a dynamic mic, so you can, it's not going to not pick up sound. You can do whatever you want with it. The SM7B that I'm using right now, also a dynamic microphone. So, and this is a very famous, studio vocal microphone. There's nothing that says you couldn't use a pod mic to record vocals, or really any mic to record vocals. So to answer the question, yes, it's suitable for vocals. The caveat is whatever you're recording with, like right now I'm recording into the Rodecaster and I'm monitoring my audio from the Rodecaster and there's no delay. A lot of USB mics let you plug headphones directly into the microphones. You can listen with no latency, no delay. If you use something like the Focusrite Scarlett, you can plug your headphones directly into that so you can listen with no delay. That's very important if you want to do vocals for a song, no matter what microphone you're using, being able to listen without a delay, because what that's going to let you do is get your timing right. And for some reason, if you've ever talked into a microphone where there's even like just a millisecond or 2 delay in your audio, it just breaks your brain and you start talking slowly. It just like, it short circuits everything for some reason. So be sure you have a way to monitor your audio with no latency. and no matter what mic you're using, and then you'll be fine. And that means also when you're listening to the track that you're recording your vocals for, everything will be timed and matched up perfectly. So, yeah, pod mic's great for vocals. Thank you so much for that question. Here we go. Another one. This was sort of a funny one. I replied to this one, so if you're seeing it on screen, it's this from, actually I can't see my screenshot. It just, I messed up on the screenshot, so it just says O'Brien. I forgot the first name, but it says, any tips on using my Rodecaster Pro and pod mics for generating revenue? My reply was, make stuff that people want to pay for or advertise on, because that will do it. Now, that's sort of like a tongue-in-cheek answer, but not really, because I mean, that's really it. If you want to generate revenue with these things, make stuff with them. And then potentially people will want to advertise on that. If it's a podcast or something, or, if it's a YouTube channel, you can do ad revenue. The Rodecaster videos I've made, like just the Rodecaster review, my first video about the Rodecaster, at this point has generated enough ad revenue to pay for the Rodecaster itself several times over. So that's a great way of the Rodecaster generating revenue. If you're doing a podcast and you're using these to create high quality stuff, then you could seek out sponsors, seek out that kind of stuff. Potentially, especially in a post-COVID world, if you have a nice studio space and you have all the gear, you could potentially rent it out, have people come in and record their own stuff. For me, I have never, I'm like, this is my space here, my space. This is my area over here, so it's not a place that I'm going to like rent out to people. But in the past, when I've been in situations where I'm producing something and people are sort of coming in and using it, it's a lot of work to have people come in and use your stuff, and then I don't know that you would be able to charge enough money to make like renting out worth it. So if you want to generate revenue with those things, I would use them to create high quality content that could either have ads run on it via a platform or via a sponsor. That would probably be the best way to do it. So thank you so much for that question. I appreciate that. Next question from YouTube. Okay, this is one of this, but this is the most popular question. I got this many, many times. This one is from Kaj Michelson and says, hey, Tom, when are you and Peter going to record another podcast? I enjoy your content. Thanks, Kaj. Yes, this is the question. I get asked this so many times. So Peter, if you follow Peter, you can go to his YouTube channel, and he just did a studio tour video after finishing building his YouTube studio. So he had a studio that was like home built, and then he totally built out like a second part, all down from just the wooden floorboards and rafters to finished, fully functioning YouTube studio. So he basically more than doubled the size of his studio space and did it all himself. That took a couple months. And while he was doing that, he pretty much didn't do anything else. Like, he hardly uploaded any videos during that time, didn't do any podcasting because everything was taken down. Now that is finished, and he's been uploading more frequently, so he's kind of been catching up on everything that he wasn't able to do while his studio was being built. And now we're kind of at the point where we talk all the time. Like, we have like super long conversations, which probably could be podcasts, but we're just not recording them. And so hopefully soon we will. The podcast is not gone. If you saw Peter's, if you watch his studio tour video, he even has a podcasting corner set up over there. He's got 2 Rodecasters, so he can have one in each room. Many, many microphones and boom. Like, he's ready to go. We just need to do it. Fortunately, our schedules are easier to match now because we don't have to work around my work schedule. Before, it was kind of hard because it was basically like we either record like Saturday mornings, which would be, for me, it'd be like 9 a.m. For him, it'd be like 5 p.m. Or during the week, we'd have to record at like 6 a.m. my time, so we could record before I had to start work at 7:30. And then that would be like 4 p.m. or 3 p.m. or something his time. But then that meant I had to get up at even earlier than normal to not only prep for work, but prep for podcast. And then I sounded very tired on our recording. So now we have more flexibility, which is awesome. We're trying to find a consistent day where we can just block it out. This day, this time, boop, meet and record. But yeah, so that's I don't have a specific date, just hopefully soon. We did try recording when he was in the middle of construction. It totally didn't work because he had been like, he was like covered in sawdust, and every like 2 seconds of talking, it was just like coughing, coughing, coughing from all the sawdust everywhere and all that. So we're like, let's just wait until everything is done and polished and ready to go. So hopefully that answers that question, because lots of people ask that. Don't worry, podcast is not gone. Peter and I are still very much friends, and we talk all the time, and Peter's terrific. Actually, I spent a lot of money on international calls last month because I didn't realize they cost extra. Next question. David Young says, a lot of your equipment was accumulated over the years. If you were to start anew from ground zero with everything that you know now, what would be your first purchase or purchases? That is a great question, because there's definitely stuff I bought that I don't use, or, stuff that was not available years ago or whatever. What I would start out with, so if I was starting brand new, okay, I want to do a YouTube channel or a podcast. I mean, it's kind of the basics, computer, camera, audio, lights. I mean, that's probably a given. I wouldn't overthink it too much. My base model Mac Mini is still going super strong. I would get an M1 Mac. So whether that's one of the MacBooks, the Mac Mini, or the new iMacs, I would get an M1 Mac, because that's going to handle all the processing of everything you're going to need. And it's going to come with software you can use, because it will have GarageBand for free. It will have iMovie. You could install DaVinci Resolve for free if you needed to, and then you could upgrade to paid software later on if you needed to. So that'll handle the computer side of things. That's definitely where I would go. As far as like a camera goes, I really would want to save up for like an EOS R if I had nothing, because I still think that's just about the best value. I'm really surprised with the A7S III and the EOS R. The A7S III looks better, but the R, even at 1080 scaled up to 4K, holds its own with the native 4K of the A7S III really well. The A7S III is a better camera, like I've said, but it's really not like, oh yeah, definitely that's twice the price of the R. Like, no, the EOS R is half the price and definitely not half the camera. So that's where I would go, because I think that's the best value in terms of camera. And it's got the flip out screen. You can add lenses to it over time. You can adapt it to use any of Canon's lenses that have been around forever. And yeah, it's a good camera. It's got good autofocus, great video. The files are easy to work with on any computer. And yeah, there's cheaper cameras, and I get that question a lot of like, $500 or less. And yeah, you could hang out like the M50 world. You could maybe go to the RP, but especially below anything like that, or like the Sony A6400 is a good one. But it's just like a lot of that comes with compromises or frustrations, and it is better to just wait and buy something that's not going to have any of that. So the EOS R would be my camera. I would get some kind of good audio solution. I don't know if I were just starting that I'd jump in and get the Rodecaster, because I don't know if I would have a need for it, but I would get something that would let me do good audio. At least an interface so I could plug an XLR mic, like get a pod mic, get a Scarlett or something, connect that to my computer. Rodecaster if it's in the budget, for sure. I mean, if we're assuming there's no budget, then yeah, Rodecaster. And then a camera mic, I would go for the Video Mic NTG. That's my favorite on-camera microphone. It's so good. So that way I have a mic that's just for my camera. I have a mic I could use for higher quality audio, like studio quality audio. And then, I guess lighting would be important. I would just start with I guess some of the companies have cheaper lights now. Like Aperture just came out with their like home studio lights, which are super affordable, like $200. That's probably the way to go. You can find those super inexpensive light kits on like Amazon, where you get like a fluorescent light and a softbox and a light stand for like $80. I used one of those for a long time. I'd probably start there, but I wouldn't neglect lighting, and I wouldn't neglect audio, and I wouldn't neglect video. But that's kind of around where I would start, and then your workflow sort of determines things. Like, some people use gimbals constantly, and some people never do, or drones, or sliders, or multiple cameras, or whatever. That stuff will emerge down the line. The basics are get a decent camera. If you can't afford it, if you had to not get one of those things, I would say just use your phone and invest in good audio and a light, because phone cameras are fine, at least to get started. And the better audio quality is going to be more important than the better video quality. in the long run. I think that answers the question. And then, you can just keep spending money on stuff forever after that. So yay. Thanks so much, David, for your question. I really appreciate it. All right. Up next, we've got Farkas Ambrus. What do you recommend to upgrade first for a student in a budget setup, mostly for online classes and studying? Audio. Yes, say adios to bad audio. And I mean, literally, like I did the video on my channel with the Fifine K669B USB microphone that's usually like $30 to $40 online. That's a great sounding microphone. You can get something like the Rode NT USB Mini for $100, the Samson Q2U. I mean, there's a lot of, in the $50 to $100 price range of USB mics, you have all kinds of options. And that's where I would start right there. That's going to change everything. And then if you want to move away from your built-in webcam, which probably doesn't look amazing, you could get, I wouldn't spend a ton of money on a webcam. Sometimes people send me links to things where they're like, I'm thinking of getting this $400 webcam. Does it seem like a good deal? And I'm like, no. I mean, it's not that it's a bad camera, but that's a lot of money to invest in a webcam when you could then, it's just a lot of money to invest in a webcam. So you can get something like like $100 webcam that's going to just be clearer and crisper than your built-in one. Or you could find a way to use your phone as a webcam, like your phone's rear camera as a webcam. Or if you've got a camera sitting around, a Canon, a Sony, whatever, use the USB apps that all of the manufacturers have. And I know it's like sitting around, but a lot of people have like a Canon Rebel from 6 years ago, or they have friends and family that do. And you could take that, use the Canon EOS webcam utility, plug it in through USB for free. And it's not perfect, but at least you could use that. But if you want to know what to do first, audio, 100%. Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Appreciate it. Up next, Rudy on the go. I'll make this quick since you're on the go. Hi, Tom. I'm Rudy from Gardena, California. We're not that far apart. I've been watching your channel for quite some time now, and I've invested my money on Rode products and currently use them for my podcast channels, my YouTube channels, and my live streams. My question is, what am I doing wrong not being able to hear my callers when directly plugged in via the TRRS cable into my Rodecaster Pro? All right. I don't have a... Okay. Without like insulting... Sometimes when people ask tech questions and I say like, is it turned on? Like that kind of stuff. It's like, I'm not trying to insult the person's intelligence. It's just, we're going to start from the basics and work our way up. So if you've already tried all this, Rudy, I apologize. And I'm sure that you're very adept at all of these things since you've got multiple podcast channels, all this stuff. But the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to trying to use the phone with the Rodecaster through the TRS channel is by not using an actual TRRS cable. The way that you can tell you're using a real TRRS cable is at the end of it, the jack itself, the connector, I don't know what the technical term is, but it's going to be gold or silver and it's going to have black lines on it. It needs to have 3 black lines. A typical stereo aux cable will have 2 black lines. So it'll have your left and right channels, your stereo channels. That's what those black lines are. A mono cable will only have 1, so you don't want that. Stereo will have 2. An actual TRRS cable will have 3 black lines, and that's so you have your left and right audio, but the third one is what basically lets you like use the microphone and go back and forth. So make sure you're using an actual TRRS cable. And then beyond that, it should, and I say this tentatively, if you're using the actual cable, everything should be fine. Once you have the smartphone dial, or smartphone fader, I should say, turned up on your Rodecaster, then you should be able to hear them. They should be able to hear you. They should be able to hear the full mix, and everything should be good. I'm using the word should there because that's it. I wish I had a more clear answer because it sounds like that's what you're doing. But without sitting in front of your Rodecaster and pushing the buttons myself, that's the best troubleshooting I can do. Make sure you're using a true TRRS cable. And I learned that myself because I was like, oh, these are all the same. They're the same size. They fit. If you just take a regular auxiliary cable and plug it into that channel and play your phone's audio, you should be able to hear that, but they're not going to be able to hear you. And And just make sure you're using an actual TRS cable. That's going to be my main suggestion. And if you are, and you have other info you can provide, just send me a message and I'll troubleshoot with you. Up next, last YouTube comment from Art Carrasco says, I just recently, finally, was able to pick up a Rodecaster Pro for myself. Yay! I've seen your videos and lots of other creators about the monitor out to a camera. I'm looking into the Hosa YPP308, a balanced TRS cable with dual male and single female cable, and combining it with a line level mic attenuator. Have you ever heard of anyone trying this to help with the noise issue when recording from monitor out to camera mic in? I should have paired this question with Matt's question that we started off with. So Art, yes, it sounds like you're doing everything right, because when you get those weird sounds, adding in something like a mic level attenuator, which you can find those on Amazon usually for pretty cheap, sometimes like under $10. I don't know what the technical engineering voodoo behind it is, but it's basically a thing that you put in your signal chain, and it helps clean everything up and protect some of that interference from happening. I would definitely start that, see if it works, and you should be good to go. If not, again, just record since you're using it with a camera, if you're doing this for any kind of streaming, connecting them separately, again, is always good. If you're doing pre-recorded content, just recording in the Rodecaster, recording in your camera, syncing them up in post is the way to go. So I should have paired that with Matt's question. Thank you to Art and everyone who submitted questions on YouTube. We're going to wrap up now. There's like a lot of questions left, but we're going to jump into Instagram. So up first, we've got Jetpack Jeff back again. What events or meetings are you looking forward to now that the pandemic is almost fizzled out? Well, it depends. Heather and I went to Vegas this past week for our 1-year anniversary. That was the first trip we've taken since February of 2020. And I was very hesitant. We're both fully vaccinated, so that helped me feel better. We wore masks the whole time. But I got to say, we stayed at the Palazzo in Vegas and spent most of our time there and at the Venetian. It was by far the cleanest place I've been since the pandemic started. The level of anytime anybody touched anything and left, there'd be somebody there cleaning every part of it. And there's the glass dividers up everywhere. There's hand sanitizers every 15 feet. There's mask dispensers everywhere. So if you just need a mask, you just pull one out for free. That was awesome. So that made me feel really comfortable. And if that kind of thing continues and overall numbers continue to go down, then I'd feel more comfortable thinking of events and things. Right now, I'm still a little hesitant for large group gatherings. I don't know. The biggest one that I'm thinking of is NAB was announced. I think it's going to be in October of this year. And that's also in Vegas, which is why this is relevant. But NAB is one that I've always wanted to go to. I was going to be able to go last year. I was going to be able to get I didn't even have to pay. I was going to get given tickets to go. And that's also where Peter was going to come from Sweden and meet up with a bunch of people. And it was, we're all going to hang out and get to meet each other in person. And then that didn't happen. So I'd be very excited for NAB, specifically because a lot of the people that I've, become friends with in the YouTube world and the video production world and on Twitter and stuff are people who would also go there. And it'd be wonderful to meet and see all those people in person. So that's my big one that I'm really excited for if it's safe enough. And I'm still hesitant. There's stuff like VidCon and VidSummit, but those might actually end up just being next year things. We'll kind of see we'll see how that works out. Thanks. Great to see you again, Jeff. And next Instagram from Persant. Of course. How many videos in does it take to get over being embarrassed when people watch you film yourself? I actually misread this question when I saw it earlier. I thought it said, how many videos does it take before you stop being embarrassed to film yourself? And I was going to say, anywhere from about 5 to 10 is where you start to develop the reps of talking to the camera doesn't feel weird. But you're talking about talking to the camera in front of other people, which is, it will always feel weird. And I think you can find people with millions of subscribers who've been doing this forever. And they're still yes, it is uncomfortable in public. It depends. Some people are more comfortable with it than others. Heather does a really cool thing, and I learned about this when we were, actually, it wasn't even we were there. She was at VidCon, but it was like the first VidCon she went to after we met. Sometimes when she's at events like that, she will just walk around or just film herself, not even for a video. Like she will just literally talk about what she's seeing. Like, I'm walking down the hallway and there's a trash can there. I'm going into this area over here because I want to do this. And it's just to kind of get comfortable with it, even though that footage will never be used for anything. I think that's an awesome idea. For me, something that actually helped a lot, surprisingly, was using my Benro travel tripod with my camera. Because you would think using a smaller camera, maybe using your phone or a small point and shoot camera, for me, that was more uncomfortable. Once I used a big camera, I don't know why, I just felt more comfortable with it. And there was something about like holding the Joby out and like talking like that, like very typical vlog thing. I'm so uncomfortable with that. But something about like taking a regular tripod and setting up a tripod and then standing in front of that and talking, I almost don't feel uncomfortable at all. And I don't know what it is. Maybe, I don't know why. It's almost like it looks more official, or it seems more official when people go by. They're like, that person's not making a YouTube video. They're using a tripod, like, which is stupid. For some reason, that really, really helped. And it helped too, because it's like the camera's taking care of itself. I'm not holding it up. I'm not also going back to, engaging with the camera, not being distracted by everything. You're holding up, your camera on a handheld device, and you're trying to talk to that and remember what you're saying, and you're feeling uncomfortable. By using the separate tripod, the camera is taken care of. It's steady, it's stable, it's over there. You just have to do your thing here, and it's fine. And people are usually pretty good at, like, they don't want to interrupt or get involved, so they kind of like, it's almost like you put up a barrier and people don't go in that barrier. So that's the thing that helped me. I don't know if there is ever a time where the discomfort ever fully goes away, unfortunately. Matt Parker 32 says, what made you want to start podcasting? I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but the reason that I wanted to also dive into Matt's question was sort of the same thing of starting the YouTube channel, and, talked about why I liked audio, how I got into podcasting, but eventually getting to the point where it's like, yes, I'm going to get started, was really that idea of every day that I wait is another day that I could have been doing it. And if I wait another year, I could be a year into it. If I wait 2 more years, I could have been doing it for 2 more years. And eventually you get really tired of that. And I was barreling towards my mid-30s at the time. And it's like, well, geez, I don't like, this is a great time in life to start new things and to do stuff like that. So I'm glad that I did. But that was kind of it, was realizing any more time I waited was time that I could be just getting better at what I'm doing. So that was a big reason there. Thanks, Matt. Great to hear from you. Oh, there's 2 here. That's why I was like, why is this one so tiny on the screen? So from Dor Gitman, can you talk about how your workflow, how much original data you save after you finished a project. So I've talked about workflow, but this is sort of a question, especially speaking of this Sony over here, when you start filming in like 4K and stuff, and each project can be hundreds of gigabytes. What do you save? What do you not save? My workflow actually hasn't changed even from incorporating a new camera. There's a few things that I do. So I record onto my SD cards internally into my cameras. And then sometimes the Rodecaster's recording too, or I'm doing a screen share. But when I'm done with all that, I'm talking about like for a YouTube video, I take all that footage and then throw it into a folder that's on the external drive for my Mac Mini, because the Mac Mini itself is only 256 gigs, but there's a terabyte drive attached to it. So everything goes on there. And that's what goes into Final Cut. That's also where the Final Cut library lives. So it's all there. That's pretty much the same. And then you build up your Final Cut stuff. When I'm done with everything, I have a small little SSD that I save the finished projects to. So that goes there. That also includes like the thumbnails and stuff. And then I have a separate hard drive, a bigger one, a slower one, that I keep the raw footage on. But I don't keep the talking head portions, because if I have 3 cameras going and I'm talking for 40 to 60 minutes, that can be literally 150 or 200 gigabytes of me just sitting here talking. I've never, now that I say this, I'm gonna knock on wood, I've never needed that footage afterwards. So I don't save that, but I do save all of the B-roll shots and stuff, because that can really come in handy. If I'm making a video about the Rodecaster and I forgot to film something, I can go back and I've got so much B-roll footage of the Rodecaster, I can pull out a clip and drop that in a new video or something. So I do save that stuff, but I don't save me talking, and that all goes on another hard drive. Every video just has its own folder. After that, that's really it. And then I just delete the project files. I don't save my Final Cut project files. And then I go into Final Cut, click on the library, and then do delete generated media files. And that way all of the renders and everything just get cleared out. I create a new event for every video, and that's where I kind of like put the project file for that video and just delete that and start the next one. I do a new library for Final Cut every month. So I'll do like a May library, June, April, whatever, you know the months. And the reason I do that is just sometimes the libraries can get a little weird over time. So by like doing a new one, I've heard of some people who do a new library for every single project they do, and that makes sense too. But it monthly seems to be good. So that's my basic data management workflow. I hope that's helpful or whatever. And then once everything is saved to those external drives, I delete it from my Mac Mini drive. So nothing lives on there except for stuff that I need all the time. So I do have a folder of like specific graphics. I do have a folder that I took like some very common background songs that I use that I had put into Adobe Audition and extended out to like 15 minutes using the remix feature that I made a video about. I took those, and those are there because I just sometimes pull those constantly, or certain graphics like my title logo or the little animated subscribe things. Those live on my computer because I know I need those every time, but nothing else actually lives on my computer. So hope that's helpful. Joshy989, next goal to tick off the bucket list. Do you even have a bucket list? I have the bucket list. Huh. Where is it? Yeah. I actually do somewhere. There's a document that has a bucket list, which could have specific things on it, like being gainfully self-employed or, marrying the perfect partner or something. But I wanted to have a list of like tangible, like check stuff you could specifically do. Heather has a great one. I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this, but one of her bucket list items is sorry, I'm untangling a mic cord. One of her bucket list items is to jump from one train car to another. Not even on a moving train. It could be a parked train, but just whoop, from one train car to another. And I love that. I think it's a cool one. I would like to do that too. And so sometimes we'll see like stop trains when we're driving, and the cars are like, sometimes they're really close together, sometimes they're really far apart. But if it's a really close together one, it's always like half joking, like we could pull over and check that item off the bucket list right now. Haven't done that yet though. For me, I have two that immediately come to mind that have been on my list for a long time. One of them is to eat a Dorito fresh off of the assembly line. Because years ago, I was reading a Reddit thread. I don't remember what it was, but it was like, what's a unique thing about your job that people might not know? And somebody who worked at like the chip factory was like, if you've never had a fresh Dorito, it's an entirely different experience. Would totally recommend it. And I guess, I guess that's just the Frito-Lay company. So it'd be like a barbecue chip would be good too, or a Cheeto or something. But specifically, Doritos are like my favorite chips, just the old school nacho cheese ones. I love them. Had them with my lunch today. They're so good. Having one of those fresh off the line. That's a bucket list item. The other one that comes to mind is I would love to be a Jungle Cruise tour guide at Disneyland. Not as like a job or for a year or anything, but for like a day or an afternoon or whatever. Like enough times to go around where I could like get into a rhythm, but I don't need it to be like my full job. I just want to be a Jungle Cruise tour guide. And I just want to be the best one I can be. I don't want to like make it insane or anything. Like I want to do it the way you're supposed to do it. Like here's the backside of water, and like, oh, you get to fire the cap gun into the air and the whole thing. That's the perfect. It's just stupid puns and like it's the best. Yeah. and you have a captive audience that literally can't escape. They just have to deal with it. So that sounds awesome. That's a big one. I have no idea of how to make that one happen, but this whole YouTube thing blows up ever, and I get enough clout, as the kids say, maybe I could hook that up. So anyway, those are my two that come to mind, bucket list items. But I think it's really fun to have goals that are like things that you could actually just check off. Because if it's like achieve personal happiness, like at what point do you feel that you know, something where it's like, I did the thing, I jumped from one train car to the other, check. I think those are actually very important goals. All right, we've got two more questions. Second to last one. PhotoBop86, is it worth waiting for the next gen of Apple MacBooks, or is the current gen fine? Current gen sounds amazing. I haven't used one myself, but they get amazing reviews. They've been out for a while though, and it seems like probably this summer-ish is when Apple will announce the next ones. That's what I'm waiting for. I sold my 16-inch, and I just set that money aside to use on the next ones, because rumor has it, which seems to be getting more and more credible as time goes on, that they'll announce a 14-inch MacBook, which would be like perfect for me. The 16-inch was a little too big. It was nice. It wasn't too unwieldy, but it was just like a little too big. 14-inch would be really nice. And supposedly, well, if it's the next generation M1 chip, then definitely it'll have more ports. The limited 2 ports, and that's it, is just not enough. For me, like I'll max that out immediately. So having more ports would be good. And the rumor again is that they're bringing back some stuff like the MagSafe power adapter, SD card slot, HDMI output. And it sounds like, why would Apple do that? And I don't know if they actually will or not, but there's been like relatively credible rumors that that's a thing. And I would love to wait and see. Normally I'm of the mindset of, if you need something, just get it. Because when it comes to tech, if you wait for, there's always going to be, like we're heading into late spring, early summer right now. You're going to start hearing all the iPhone rumors for fall, for like September or whenever they announce the next iPhone. It's just, you're going to hear more and more about next iPhone, next iPhone, next iPhone. Then it's going to come out and it's going to be like, oh my gosh, here's the review of the next iPhone. And then as soon as that's done, it's going to be like next year's iPhone. It's just going to start over again. So there's never a great time. But since it does seem like we're on the cusp of, in the next couple months, getting an announcement that could include the next version of an M1X, because Apple, or the M1 processor, because Apple hasn't updated basically any of the pro stuff with the M1 yet. And so it's kind of like, interesting. Maybe they're going to do all that at once. I don't know. So that's kind of my answer there. And our very last but not least question from Real Miguel Nunez, the real one, not the fake Real Miguel Nunez. How much money have you invested, and would you do things differently? I don't know if you mean like stocks and bonds or in equipment. I did for my 18th birthday. I asked for an IRA account, or an IRA, and my parents helped me open one. So I've been contributing to that for 18 years now. That's cool. And then I just sort of buy other stocks, mainly Apple and Tesla. Those ones have been doing very well over the years. And then some other stuff like Beyond Meat. I think I have like some consolidated real estate holdings company that I was like, I was trying to be like smart on my own. But anyway, I'm bad at investing. I just put it all in a Vanguard fund for the most part and let it do its thing. But I'm assuming it would make more sense if you're talking about gear. I've tried to add up the value of all my current gear, and it's definitely in the tens of thousands of dollars. If you've listened to the past 2 episodes where I agonized over a camera purchase, you know that I'm usually not just like, whoa, I'll just buy whatever. So I'm very happy with all my gear purchases. I don't really have anything I regret. There's definitely stuff that I probably didn't need as much. A gimbal comes to mind. I was thinking yesterday, I was like doing some purging in my studio here. I got rid of 2 garbage bags of stuff and a bag of things to donate, like big bags, which feels great. But I was thinking like, okay, the gimbal. I rarely use the gimbal. I know the newer ones are easier to use, but I definitely bought the gimbal because it was like the thing at the time. Like, you got to get the Ronin gimbal and it's so cool. But the gimbal does allow me to do stuff I can't do in any other way, specifically like that 360-degree barrel roll shot, which I love and I use from time to time in things. I can't get that any other way. And so like I'm hanging on to that because it does things that it just does things I can't do any other way. But I think what I would continue to do, or at least remind myself, is not to get caught up in hype. You know, a bunch of new drones came out, which are amazing. I have my drone pilot's license. I have 2 drones and, you know, they're older, and looking at the new ones, which are good values and deliver great image quality, I'm very tempted to go like, oh my gosh, I could get a new drone and do, but I hardly ever use a drone. And for the amount of times that I do, the ones I have are more than enough. So like, I don't need to get on the hype train of like, oh my gosh, new drones, because it's not what I need. So just because people are excited about something, or just because something new comes out, it doesn't mean that, oh, you got to get that. You know, using the Canon EOS R, you know how much I love that camera. It's a 3-year-old camera that, you know, people really, really, really were ragging on when it came out 3 years ago because of the specs on it. And I still love that camera. So, I'm very happy with my gear purchases. I haven't made too many, like, you know, I can't really think of any off the top of my head that were terrible. Like, oh, I shouldn't have bought that thing, or, you know, I bought something that I really didn't need, or something like that. But continuing to do that and not falling into it's tough. Like, it sounds so stupid, but when you see tons of other people using something or getting excited about something, it's hard for you not to feel that too, or not to feel like, oh, I'm going to be left out if I don't do that. Or do they know something I don't know? Like, should I be using that too? Because that's what they're using. Like, just stay your own course, do your own thing, be your own person, and everything will be fine. That's all the questions. We did it. Thank you so much to everybody who submitted questions. Thank you for the voice submissions. That was really cool. Also saved my voice from having to read out questions. That was really, really fun. I love doing Q&A things. We'll be back in season 5 with the next one. So a couple months from now, actually. So save those questions. We got 2 episodes left this season, which will be really, really fun. Again, if you want to support this show, you can do so either through Patreon or YouTube channel memberships. And then you also get the video versions of the podcast. Links for everything are in the show notes if you want to, or you can just support the show by listening and enjoying it and sending me a message to let me know what you think, because that's cool too. I'm at Sodarn Tom on all the things, as you hopefully know at this point. And I think that's about it. So thanks so much for spending your time with me. Hope you have a great, happy, healthy, fun rest of your week, and I will see you next time.